So we'll get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Don Saucier. I am the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center, and we are very excited to welcome you to our Professional Development Series this Wednesday. As you probably know, we have professional development events every Wednesday at noon at the same Zoom link, and we're so glad that you're here. We've had a great slate of events so far, and we're really excited about the ones we have upcoming that are really going to help us get through the rest of this semester. We've had unprecedented challenges. We've had a lot of things show up, and flexibility is kind of the name of the game right now. I am deeply grateful for the three presenters that we have today because they're three of my favorite people on campus. And I think if we were going to pick three people who promoted first generation students more than any other, these would be the three that I would pick. So I am so excited about this. So we're going to have Greg Eislein, a director of K-State First, Kylie Moody, the managing director of Scholar Services, and Rebecca Paz, the director of the Office of First Generation Students, to talk to us about how we can support first generation students. And as a first generation student myself, I am so glad that we're doing events like this. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our experts today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much. Rebecca and Kylie and I were going to do short introductions, but I don't think we need to, right? We can just jump right into this. So we thought we would start with you and your kind of impressions on what's going on. So we're going to send out a Zoom poll question here in just a second. But the question is just, how well do you think first generation college students are handling college in the midst of the pandemic compared to their continuing generation peers? So we know that everybody is struggling to some extent, but how well do you think first gen students are doing compared to their continuing generation peers? And we're going to launch that poll question and just take a moment and think about it and let us know.
And while you do that, I would like to just quickly do a land acknowledgement, if you give me 2 minutes. As the first land grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is historically home to many Native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized Native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska.
Thank you, Rebecca. And just a couple more, if you just joined us, we've got up a poll. And the question is, in general, from your experience this semester, how well do you think first generation college students are handling college in the midst of the pandemic compared to their continuing generation peers? Are they doing about the same? Are they doing better? Are they struggling more? What do you think? Okay, let's close that poll. And the winner here, and this is an opinion question, you know, we don't have the data yet from this semester because this semester is not actually over. But most of you, over half of you, think they're struggling more than their peers. Some of you think they're struggling much more. Some think it's about the same. And at least one person thinks they're doing better. And we had thought about that in part because, as you all know, the first generation college students are often blessed or gifted with grit, determination, a work ethic, which is one of the things that allowed them to get here in the first place and often serves them well in college. But in general, most of you think that they're struggling a little bit more. Who would like to share a little bit about why they answered the way they did? What are you seeing? What are you seeing, and why do you think that they're struggling more?
No. So I was the person who said that they might be doing better because for the reasons that you said, Greg. I have a very small class, so a really small sample size, but I'm seeing a lot of resilience, and they also don't know as much what to expect. And so they don't have as many expectations of what college should be like. Not all of them, of course, but some of them. And so they are more willing to just jump right in and accept the way that things are instead of struggling against that. So they may or may not have higher grades, but I'm seeing in terms of resilience and persistence, I'm seeing them do really well in those regards.
And persistence is important here. And I think you're right, Melissa, that for some students coming from, I don't know, a 5th generation K-State purple family, they've heard the stories like college is like this and this is what you do. And nothing we're doing this semester seems traditional or that's a hyperbole, by the way. But many of the things we're doing have changed from the way they've been in the past, and we're needing to change. How about those that you think they're about the same? Thoughts about why you thought they're comparable? I would have been inclined to answer this way simply because I don't know yet. And this is one of those kind of hunch questions rather than an official or scientific poll. But for those of you who said they're comparable, why did you say that? Did I forget to say this was interactive?
I'll jump in here and say, I think this is new territory for everybody. So I think everybody is, has a lot of hurdles and a lot of stress and a lot of different things going on in their life. And so I chose that one for that reason.
Thank you, Trina. I appreciate that.
Someone in the chat mentioned that they weren't sure, and so it picked that maybe they were comparable. Because again, it is sometimes hard to know who are the 1st generation students in your class. And so I think that's a very fair and very good observation.
I agree. I agree. And as I mentioned already, we don't know. We are not, we have anecdotes to go on, hunches to go on, but we don't have the data yet. They will be coming eventually. And then I think that will tell us a little bit more about what the experience is. But the vast majority of you, almost 70% of you said that you think they're struggling more or much more than their peers. I'll be honest, that's some of what we're seeing at K-State First. But for those of you who answered that way, why? Who's going to jump in here?
I'll go ahead and jump in.
Okay.
Okay, so the reason I had gone ahead and said that is because I have concerns about whether there are other people around to support, or that they would know where to find support if they do start to struggle a little bit. I know, for example, my parents wouldn't have known how to do stuff on the computer, so I wasn't going to be able to go to them, for example, to ask if I ran into problems with that.
Excellent. Thank you, Natalie. I mean, that's one of our big concerns, is that the campus is far quieter than usual. There are fewer advisors, professors, administrators, and to be honest, just upper level students that kind of been through this before hanging around campus than in the past. And we're concerned that 1st-gen students might not know where to go. Thank you. Who else was going to jump in here?
This is
Guy and then Andy.
Yeah, look, I was just going to say, being a age student, everybody, this social distancing has everybody socially isolated. And a big part of that whole university experience is that social interaction, particularly if you're new to the environment, knowing where to go, knowing what to do, just developing your social network and skills. And that's just completely lacking. And it has to significantly compromise the situation, particularly if you're more of an extroverted personality. I think they would be really struggling. Also, I think there's a big portion of the population that is more They're, I forget what the Myers-Briggs type is, but they're doers rather than thinkers. They learn by experience. And by moving everything online rather than in the classroom, there's just a complete absence of that. And I actually would suggest they're being completely overlooked and have probably disengaged to the point where it's, you know, number of people I think have elected not to enroll, take some time off, and I think that's probably a big driver of that. So I think the disadvantage and the damage being done is significantly more than what you can actually measure quantitatively.
Especially at this point, Guy, and I appreciate that so much, that input and feedback. Before we get going, do Andy and Ashley want to jump in here real quick and offer their thoughts about why you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I was thinking along the same lines as what Melissa had mentioned, that there is the advantage that they have is that they don't have the same expectations. But I've noticed with the students that I have who are first generation this semester, they're really struggling to just find themselves. What Guy was saying with the isolation, I've had a couple of my students approach me, and you know, I end up kind of playing therapist because they're feeling lonely. They don't know who to talk to. And they've also expressed to me that there's times where they're reaching out to people and they're not getting a quick response from the advisors that I would normally send them to. And since everybody's on Zoom and doing it all by Zoom and email, rather than actually being able to walk into an office in a lot of cases, I think that these students just aren't getting the support that they normally need. A lot more support than our non-first generation students. And this is just not the supportive environment. You know, it's really challenging to be supportive in this way. So I think that they're really struggling with getting their needs met.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. Ashley, do you want to say jump?
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay,
all good
thank
points.
you. Well, I'm going to thank you all for kind of sharing your perspective. I'm going to turn over to Kylie.
And I'm actually going to turn it over to Rebecca, who was just going to share a little bit about this week and how we are celebrating first generation students on a national scale.
Okay, do we have a slide, Kylie, or not?
Yeah.
Yes, it just has the first generation college celebration.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, I see. I guess what I see on my screen right now, I see the polling results. So let me get rid of it. Yes. So this week we are celebrating National First Generation, and as you know, November 8th, you may know, has been a designated National First Generation Student Day. So this workshop is part of the celebration. And just a quick fact that 27% of our undergraduate students are first generation. And today is the last event that we're having. So we've had several sessions already. You can go to the next slide, Kylie. So then what I would like to talk about a little bit is about the challenges. I think many of you already unpacked, and it's like, okay, this is the points I'm going to make. So I really appreciate that you're thinking that way. But before we unpack the challenges during COVID, I just want to outline a few pre-COVID, because as you know, first-gen students do not come to college understanding the university system, right? Which translates into the first barrier that they encounter when they enroll and they come to college. So to quote a first-generation veteran student from one of our sessions yesterday, this is what he said: "A little bit of direction helps a ton." And I think that really echoes what was said earlier, but also if we can keep that in mind, pre-COVID, a little bit of direction helps a ton, and that's for us to keep in mind. Another barrier common to our first generation students is the imposter syndrome. And this is defined as an internal feeling of intellectual phoniness or having deceived others of one's ability. And feeling like an imposter can also translate into lack of sense of belonging to the university. And I can, from talking to many students, that imposter syndrome is so real, right? And it's there and it's hidden. Another barrier that the students may be having is having a fixed mindset rather than a growth mindset to learning. And as you know, fixed mindset is believing that people are born with a fixed level of intelligence that cannot be modified. For example, a student may say, I'm not good at math. I'm not good at writing. I'm not smart enough. And that would cause them to get discouraged and not persevere. On the contrary, a growth mindset is having the underlying belief that learning and intelligence can grow with time and experience. And in the case of the math example, the student may say, with enough practice and time, I can learn math. I may even major in math if I like it enough, right? So that's the difference between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset that can really be also a barrier. So those were just 3 barriers that I wanted to outline before COVID. So now, once COVID hit, as you have all said it very eloquently, we see now how these barriers have been compounded by other roadblocks added by the pandemic. And one of the most obvious ones has to be with financial challenges. And this has hit our first generation and low income students disproportionately. I'm sure you're all aware of it. It's all over the news. We talk about it. And so how this translates is into many first generation students worked part-time jobs, and then all of a sudden they lost income to pay the rent. And consequently, some of them may experience homelessness and food insecurity. That's going to affect their learning. That's going to affect their progress. This also financial difficulty translated into lack of access to technology, and not only access to computer, but also unstable Wi-Fi. And I think we all can really relate to the technology challenges, right? Even this morning, we were having those challenges. So also some of our students moved back home, and which in many cases added barriers to the learning environment, more barriers. If they are home, now they found themselves sharing space with family members, and many had to help with taking care of siblings and helping with their siblings' learning. So you see more layers, more layers, more layers. And so this can translate into emotional stress. And as you can see, these stressors and layers are piling up. And I know that there's some articles being written about how students are experiencing, and I've been trying to keep up with that through the Chronicle of Higher Education, but also some of the wisdom that we're sharing here is from talking to our students, what they're saying. But we see that the social and academic impact of our students really is impacting our students because of COVID. Kylie, would you go to the next slide, please? So let's talk about how our COVID barriers played in the Zoom classroom, okay? So we are aware of Zoom. We've got it now, right? We figured it out. And so we all had to make the rapid transition to learning and teaching online. And I feel like we have, but some students may not have made the transition yet. And they're still uncomfortable and not able to navigate this uncharted territory. They still have a lot of questions. This morning when I came in, I had a student who is taking his exams online. He had a lot of questions and he was very overwhelmed. Some students report still experiencing technical challenges. We're using so many approaches, such as new tools, organizations, and platforms, that this can also be overwhelming for students, right? A student may be using Canvas for math, and the professor may be using something else for a different class. So that creates more stressor and more confusion. And we are all aware of the Zoom fatigue, right? We can all relate to that. And research is telling us that students are having difficulty finding motivation and staying engaged. And I really want to underscore motivation and engagement, because that motivation piece is really, really, really lacking right now. And that's probably what's at the forefront of their experience. And the long hours of computer screen is taxing and exhausting. And I think we can all relate to that, but students are really feeling, and they're telling about us. And they're also finding it hard to do work outside of the class. So how about community building and engagement with peers? This is almost non-existent right now, like so many of you pointed out earlier. Students are finding it hard to make social connections, and they report needing their social support. This piece is also very essential, and then we don't have it, and it's also affecting their mental health. And for us, it's really important that we remember that one of the most important ways that students learn is from each other. And students often teach each other and explain things. Right now, we're not giving our students a chance to interact and learn from one each other, and their learning is suffering. Also, students report finding it hard to form study groups, and testing is also much, much harder for them. So we've just talked about these challenges that COVID added to us, but let's talk about the new normal. We often refer to going back to normal. And this is something that we all have to grapple with, and I think and it's changing every day, right? More news are coming. We're thinking, okay, in the spring we're gonna go back. Well, no. And so maybe we have to realize that we are building a new normal right now, right? We are walking with them. It's uncharted territory, but we're kind of building the new normal. Are we really building the new normal? And as we build this new normal, let's be aware of the barriers surfaced by the pandemic and find ways to tear them down as we develop optimal ways to serve our students, especially first-generation students who are feeling the burden the most. So that's all I have now, and I'm gonna pass it over, I believe, is Kylie.
Thank you, Rebecca. And so we have heard, and as many of you have shared, some of the challenges and the different barriers and things. And so what can we do? How can we help build community, build relationships, all of those different things that we know are really needed now? And so one thing I'm going to ask you to do in the chat, I want you to put in how you are feeling plus the last thing you ate. So for me right now, I will model it. Mine would be coffee excited because I'm getting, I haven't ate anything yet. I've been practicing fasting anyways, but then excited. And so excited noodles. That is so awesome. Oh yeah, I did mine backwards. So mine would be excited coffee. Goodness, I can't even model my own example. But this has been a fun way, and just as a way that I have used as a check-in to see how students are feeling, and just to help normalize that what a lot of us are feeling is normal, and we're all kind of feeling similar feelings. Another icebreaker that we have done that really was beneficial to help build community is to fill in the "don't get me talking about blank." I actually did this, I had another presenter do this last night with a group of students, and it was amazing because then in the chat, students were like, oh, I didn't know you liked anime. I like anime too. Or, oh, I didn't know you were into cars. I'm also into cars. And so just being intentional about asking certain questions can really help build community and can help people get connected. So determined caldereta, frustrated tacos, exhausted almond butter, and different yogurt. So again, and it's also kind of fun too, just to see what people are eating, and that also can help build some commonalities and some shared interests. So Dawn shared that students really like this activity, and I agree. I've done it even a couple of times, and people are still, you could even do like how you are feeling in the last thing you watched, or how you are feeling in the last thing you listened to. You could really switch it around, but it is a really good way to help build community. So the other thing that we've heard from students, and I'm sure you all can relate to this as well, is organization and having directions, assignments, expectations that are clear and concise, so that the students aren't having to guess about what do they need to do, what does the assignment look like, how can they meet expectations. And so this is something that I feel like we have all talked about a number of times, but this is even more important now in this new environment, especially when some students are having to manage multiple platforms. And I'm sure some of you all are experiencing this too, right? I have Ring Central, I have Teams, I have Zoom, I have Slack. And so trying to keep track of what is on what platform or what channel can sometimes add to that exhaustion and just the feeling of being overwhelmed. And so the more that we can do to help be organized, to be clear, and to be concise is really helpful. Positivity is another thing that we have talked about, which again, I'm sure you all can understand. You probably have been on Zoom calls or even in different sessions when we were able to do a little bit more in person, where if the person at the front of the room is not excited and not engaged, it's really hard for you to, right? And even though there are some days where I am not feeling it or I have certain life things going on, I kind of have to put that aside, right? And I have to show up as my best self for my students, because if I'm not excited, my students are not going to be excited to be on Zoom or to be in class. And so just being aware of that too. Also really thinking about everything from an asset-based approach and a strength mindset. So we've even had different conversations in class where I'm like, you are doing hard things. Like, you are figuring out a way to make progress. You are figuring out ways to complete assignments, to take tests. Like, don't forget about what you are doing and the strengths that you are building and those muscles that you are using and flexing. I even have to go back and remind myself of this some days when I am like, holy cow, right? Like, I kind of want to flip the table or something. But I have to remember that I'm gaining new strengths, I'm gaining new experiences. And so the more that we can remind our students of that, will again help them and be able to see that you are resilient and you're using that resiliency to continue making progress and getting closer to the end of the semester. And so that is really important to remember that. The other thing to remember is to slow down, especially for first generation students, but for all students. I have the opportunity and the pleasure to get to work with a lot of students. And I hear a lot of students that are like, oh my goodness, like, you know, it's kind of getting to the end, but then there's all this extra things and they're trying to cram things in. And, you know, I don't know how I'm going to get all of this done. And then I'm thinking about going home, whereas Rebecca mentioned, I may have siblings that I'm going to have to help take care of now that I haven't had that responsibility for the last 11 weeks. And so just being mindful of that and providing space to really slow down, to really evaluate what is the most important. Are there ways that I can help and better support my students? And so just again, being mindful of that and thinking about that is really important. I also think that the students really find value in knowing that we don't always have it all together and sharing that vulnerability. So I was with a student group last week and we were doing a session and I had President Myers come and speak, and my almost 7-year-old son decided to put on a football helmet and to play catch in the background for a majority part of the meeting, even after I'm trying to usher him out of the room and trying to get Big Sister to help. And so I think the more that the students can see, you know, what our real life looks like and that we are human and that we put our pants on one leg at a time and just share that grace and compassion is really, really important. And I think that really means a lot for our students. The other thing, I was in a meeting with the Office of Student Life earlier today, and I thought this was so genius and I hadn't thought about this. So we talk about self-care a lot, but the importance of community care. And so again, thinking that we are all here to support one another. We're all here to help each other, ask for help or to find resources or to find new ways of working. And so that is another really, really important opportunity as well. Someone also spoke to this, that the online environment is really new for a lot of us. And so I think, again, thinking about like what that has looked like for us and kind of some of the barriers that we have experienced and how that relates to being a first generation student, but that our first generation students, again, sometimes may have a bigger list in also trying to navigate that online environment, especially if we don't have family members or others who are used to using a lot of the online platforms that we all are being asked to now. I am also a first generation student, and so I'll never forget the time over the summer where my dad had called me to ask how do I use Zoom? Like, I have a company-wide meeting and I have never had to use this before. And so how do I navigate that? How do I use it? And then afterwards, he couldn't get the speakers to work, and so had to call in over his phone, and then didn't realize he was on mute. And so all of the things, right, that we are all trying to learn and navigate during this time. But I think if we can help slow down and really reevaluate, that's helpful too. Rebecca also mentioned the study groups, tips and tricks. That is another thing we've really heard from students. And so the Academic Achievement Center has created a lot of different resources and videos and things to help explain the different tools we have. But we also created just a tip for how do you create online study groups. And so this was really created in mind to help faculty and staff think about how they can help their students create study groups, but then also helping the students think about how they can help create. And so I'm sure that all of you have other ideas and things that you have tried and that you have used. But I think one of the biggest takeaways is that when you're thinking about, you know, trying different interventions or different ways of building community, we say this all of the time, that what is good for first generation students is good for all students, and will help make sure that if we can help our first generation students be successful and navigate this, then that is going to be beneficial and will help all of our students. And so with that, I am going to turn it back over to Greg.
Like your dad, I'm trying to learn how to use the Zoom machine. Thank you, Kylie, and thank you, Rebecca, and everyone. As Kylie was saying, that if you noticed, a lot of the things that Kylie talked about that we've noticed work during the pandemic for first generation students are things that usually work all of the time for most of our students. They're things that get students engaged and involved. They're things that ask us to use best practices in the field. There are things that build relationships and connections and communication with students. And I remember this in the late spring and in summer, when people like Don Saucier and Tucker and Katie Linder and a whole bunch of other people on campus were trying to help the faculty get ready to teach this fall. One of the consistent themes I heard over and over was, we know how to teach well. It might be just a matter of taking what we know works and has worked for us in the past and modifying it or adjusting it for the pandemic. It doesn't have to be a completely new, brave world. Maybe a lot of the things that we worked in the past are going to work for us again in perhaps a slightly modified way. And I think a lot of what Kylie had to say fit that theme. Study groups work. And we need to connect our first gen students with those study groups, but maybe we have to do them a little bit differently in the pandemic. On the other hand, I have this strong feeling that we just don't know yet, that we're in the midst of this semester of trying to be intentional, trying to be super supportive of first gen students, but not entirely sure, is it working well, is it not working well? And so we wanted to get your ideas and we wanted to talk a little bit with you about them. And the first question we have for you, and if you just take a minute or so to think about it, it's like, what are you seeing among your students this year? Among those who are first gen, those who aren't first gen, what are you seeing? I think Guy got us started by saying, you know, we're seeing some lack of connection. As an instructor, I know that sometimes when I look at those blank screens with names on them, I'm not entirely sure what's going on behind that screen and how my students are doing. In the past, when I could look at them in the classroom and see, are they bored? Are they getting it? Are they confused? Are they tired? I could adjust my pedagogy to how they are, but I just don't know as much because I lack that kind of quick instinctual ability to read the room and find out what's going on. But yeah, Dawn mentions a lot is happening to them right now. They're busy lives, juggling all kinds of things. And for a lot of them, like Kylie's dad and me, juggling new technologies along with that. What else are you seeing? They're overwhelmed. Melissa, do you want to just tell us a little bit more? Because I think this social skills thing is very interesting. What do you mean by that?
So I have a class of 18, and it might be about half and half, but quite a few of my students at the very beginning of the semester mentioned social anxiety, not knowing how to make friends, not knowing how to talk to people, just kind of those basic. I'm 18, 19, I have all first-year students that are traditional students, and they just don't know how to make friends. They might be living in the residence halls, and so the dining centers are different, or they're not going into people's rooms, and they only have my class in person, and so they really have a hard time just the things they would struggle with anyway. I'm not confident enough. Does this person really want to be my friend? And it's so much harder to reach out, that if they don't already have those strong social skills, they don't have the opportunities to develop them as much as they would. And then I've got students who have pretty strong social skills or confidence in connecting with others, and it's harder for them, but they're still doing it. So I think the gap between those students is widened. So does that make sense?
It does, Melissa, and I appreciate it. Early on, Guy mentioned that he mentioned something that I identified with, and it's that the pandemic has been hard for those of us who are extroverts. We get our energy, we get our rewards from interacting with other people. And when it's harder to interact, we get drained more easily, and we're tired and miserable, and we miss our friends, and we want to see people. But you're reminding me too that extroverts have that just desire to reach out and find people, and that this has been hard on introverts who also crave that human connection. It's also been hard on, as you mentioned, and this would fit either category, extrovert or introvert, people who just don't have the same set of social skills or tech skills to reach out. It's been hard on a lot of us in a lot of different ways. I agree. What have you noticed hasn't worked this year? I put this question in the chat. What are you still struggling with, especially in your interactions with first-year students? One of my experiences is that a teaching technique that I have used successfully in the past, what's the technical name for it, Don? I call it being the hard ass. Being really clear about expectations, setting the expectations high, and pushing the students with that good kind of stress to get them to do well. Being a hard-ass teacher. It often works really well. It's not been working for me this semester. What do you?
Now, I will say, Greg, though, that the being clear is working well. So I think kind of being clear and supportive, because without clarity right now, nothing works. And I think one of the things that's really, really hard is to, especially when you don't have that face-to-face contact where you can see your students not get it and intercede immediately, the importance of clarity is so much more important. So yeah, we'll keep the clear, we'll take out the hard ass, and we'll be where we need to be.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think clarity, and to be honest, I think the shift to Canvas and modules as the way of organizing my course has helped a lot, because I have plenty of opportunities to be very clear about here's what you need to do. Here are the instructions for this assignment. And I can reinforce those in our class meetings and in office hours. But I'll add that well, I won't get there yet. What else hasn't worked for you this year?
Look, I might add there, most of my students are international. It's like international extension here at IGP. So they're people in the commercial world. And when they come to Manhattan, they want to experience, they want an experience. So it's experiential. You know, they're either in the flour mill or in the feed mill, or we're out at a farm, or we're visiting grain terminals, or seeing the supply chain. And particularly, and these are the interest in something that's just classroom based has really dropped off big time. And there's a big set of people that learn, that's how they learn, and that's what they want. So conveying something over the internet, and then I've taken the opportunity to take some online graduate courses this last semester through Canvas. And at the time I started it, I thought, well, my comprehension dropped by about 50%. But then after the final week was on campus, face to face, and I actually think the capacity to learn was probably closer to 20-25%. So that being able to convey information appropriately, get feedback from are the lights on or are they off, or is the message getting across is quite different due to the mode that we're educating, because you don't have all those nonverbal tells that you can tell. One, as an instructor, or even two, as a student, can I look around the room and is everybody lost or is it just me? And how do I ask the question is just, it's gone up exponentially, all those issues. And I don't know if that's being recognized.
Thank you. I really appreciate, I agree. I agree. Jennifer, do you want to get in, join the chat or you've already joined the chat. Do you want to join the kind of discussion here and tell us a little bit more? I mean, I think I agree. I see a lot of professors that aren't particularly experienced with all the new teaching methods, trying to use all the things in Canvas and all the, and it gets confusing.
Yeah, hi.
Hey.
It does. And I'm in an online program that's always been online, and some of the classes are spectacularly designed and create great engagement. And I've been blown away with how much fun it is. But there's been one in particular, but some not as well, certainly not as well done. And when there's that lack of clarity and the assumption that there is clarity, like there's all this material here, it's all there. Well, yeah, it's all there everywhere. Yeah. It becomes extremely challenging to be working, to have a family, to be trying to do figure out each faculty member's oddities, I'll call it, in terms of how they use Canvas.
Mm-hmm. No, and you spend so much time just trying to figure out, what am I supposed to be doing? And it can be a waste of energy and time for the students. Well, Jennifer, you've also led us to kind of our third question that we want to start talking about, which is what has worked. And for Jennifer, what works are those streamlined approaches to the class, where it's clear, it's simple, there's not a million things going on. What's front and center are the key, the most important things. Empathy's worked for Dawn. What else has worked for you this semester, especially with first-gen students? Yeah, names, flexibility. Grace, yeah. For most of this semester, I was thinking that outreach, like following up with those students that missed an assignment or missed a discussion board or didn't show up in class, was helping, and it did. I think it helped a lot. But I guess I would also add that based on my experience, I have at least one student for whom the constant outreach didn't work. It wasn't that it wasn't appreciated, it just didn't turn things around. And yeah, texting in addition to email.
Yep, yes, Melissa, I agree. Like, yeah, students are not checking email, but if I text them or if I call them, I'll get a response. But if I email, it's in who knows where.
Absolutely. Texting makes a world of difference to me. And I've had a lot of conversations with a variety of people about their thoughts on texting students. And, you know, the range is huge. But my husband, who's a professor here, has hundreds of students, and I just have a few, but it works for both of us. So it doesn't work for every person, but I think it has the potential to work for a variety of situations. And sometimes it has made the difference between losing a student or not for me. And students often really like being able to text. So I would encourage anyone who's at all comfortable and interested to do so.
So someone asked, like, what platform do you use for texting? And so I know that we're going to be rolling out more, I think, with the Student Success Collaborative, and there is going to be a smart guidance app with that. But that is one way that you can text students is through that platform. And then you can also keep track of the conversations through that. And so that's also how different colleges and other areas are scheduling appointments with students, but that is a great tool to be able to use that. But there are also several students that I just exchange telephone numbers with too. I usually always give out my cell phone number, and so then they may text me if something comes up, and then I can check in with them that way as well.
And before we, the chat is filled with some great ideas. I want to just mention one, which is the don't make me watch a talking head for an hour when I could just listen to the lecture while taking a walk. I agree with that. And I think that goes back to that theme that Dawn mentioned, that Kylie mentioned, of clarity. If you can be clear with your students, like, okay, I'm going to deliver some information, and maybe they can keep their screen on black, or maybe they can just listen as they take their walk or work out or whatever. That's great. Or no, this is going to be an interactive class and I'm going to need you there present because you're going to do things during the class. And be honest about that, right? Not tell them it's an interactive class and you're really just going to be a talking head. Speaking of interaction, Kylie, Rebecca, are we ready to move to our last kind of activity? So yes. Kylie's going to put this in the chat, but we just thought we would end today with kind of collecting some ideas via the Padlet about what is one thing you would like to see the university or the office of first generation students do to help and support these students that we think are struggling. And then what is one thing that you're hoping or planning to do to support your students through the rest of this pandemic, your first gen students. So if you click the link in the chat there, you'll go to a Padlet and you can put your answers in there.
So as soon as you click on that link, then you should just be able to add a comment. You can also like other people's comments too, if you would like to do that as well. I noticed someone mentioned checking in with students about like before maybe fall break and whatnot. In the chat, I'm putting in some questions that I'm actually going to be asking my students today. I hand out note cards, and this is just another way I kind of informally take the temperature and get feedback. But just to make sure that they have, you know, resources or if there are ways that I can help support them as we think about what it looks like after fall break. So I just put those in the chat in case those are helpful for anyone.
And also, I just wanted to add that, you know, the financial aid office is a great resource because I see that here, you know, the financial piece is so essential. And so you can always send the students to the financial aid office. They each have a financial aid advisor. And I know that under CARES Act for a while, they were giving out vouchers to students who needed laptops, and I don't know if that will happen again in the spring, but you know, let's keep an eye on things. A lot of the announcements come up through K-State Today, so let's keep up with the notices, because I know that we get a lot of information, things change, but any of those resources that usually come out through K-State Today, or you can always reach out to me and I can help your students get connected.
And I'm happy to.
Oh, go, Kylie.
Sorry, I think I'm happy to help connect with students too. I also know there are several of us in the office in the Academic Achievement Center. And so I am an extrovert. And so I absolutely have to have human interaction. And so if students would like to meet up for a coffee or something masked up, I am more than willing to do that. I have met with a lot of students who I know need that. And it fills my cup up too. So I am more than happy to do that.
Kylie, I want to say that I think your questions are just, they're, I want to say brilliant, but they're brilliant and they're helpful, and it's a great checklist. And if just each of our first gen students on campus could have one person check in with them about each of these questions, I think it would go a long way. And in the process, just showing that you care, I think matters a lot. These are great ideas that I'm seeing here in the Padlet. Would anyone like to get, before we have to wrap up, would anyone like to share their ideas or highlight one of the ideas that someone else presented and talk about what they might be doing with it or why they think it's important?
Real quick.
One thing, Greg, I wanted to...
Yeah, Tucker?
No, I was just going to point out a important question in the chat. Andy was asking, what do you do if your students say that they don't have access to technology or internet, or if they are going to have some of those concerns when they go back home?
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to mention. Thank you. So I do know that some colleges are able to help with getting students laptops or allowing them to check one out during break and whatnot. The Office of Financial Aid also can help with that too. The fund that Rebecca mentioned that was doing the vouchers, that program, all of those funds were used, but they do have other options to help students with getting access to technology or being able to purchase a laptop or iPad or other things.
And we've had several students who've reached out to us, and we've been able to connect to take care of those needs. So we will continue to do that.
So one of the coolest resources that I've heard from y'all over the years is the glossary that you've kind of put together of college terms. And I wondered if any of you wanted to speak about that for just a second or two, and then that's something we can send out to participants after as well.
Sure. Yeah. So the glossary, as you know, one of the first barriers that students have is understanding the the complexities of the system of higher education. And believe it or not, we talk with lingo. We have higher ed lingo. So we, in collaboration with other campus partners, we developed a list of terms that are considered lingo, jargon words, and quick definitions so that students don't have a way to go, kind of like a pocket dictionary via the web, right? So for instance, academic dismissal, and also students are especially first generation students are hesitant to ask questions because remember that imposter syndrome kicks in and they think, oh no, if I ask this question, it's stupid. I'm going to look bad. I don't belong. So unpacking that for them is really helpful. So this list is out there for our students to understand. It's like the little Google source, but at the same time, if you find some other words that you think we don't have here, let me know because we wanna keep adding those. And especially with the pandemic, we've had a lot of new lingo, right? Like synchronous, asynchronous. I'm still trying to keep up with all the things that are surfacing. So help us with this; it will be great.
I know our university distinguishes now between modes and modalities, which I find confusing sometimes, but.
Can you explain the difference? As a first gen? I don't know.
The modalities refer to the different ways you can deliver a class.
Okay. Got it.
Melissa, Melissa, are you still there? What are your self-care assignments?
Yes, I'm still there. I was actually asking about self-care assignments because Tucker mentioned that he did those. So it wasn't my idea. I'd love to hear what those assignments are.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So after midterms, I could tell my students were getting burnt out. So I built into the next week's module just some information about self-care, had some TED Talks on self-care. And then I also challenged my students to find something that is important to them, do some sort of self-care activity, and then write up a very just brief report saying what it is that they did, why they chose that activity, how they felt before and after that activity. I also shared with them that my favorite form of self-care is cooking, and if they were to share with me one of their favorite family recipes, I would give them a little bit of extra credit, and just kind of a way for me to get to know my students during this time where I haven't been able to see them face to face. And so they seem to really appreciate it. And this morning, I actually just took all of the recipes that they provided me with and just made a very quick cookbook. And I sent that back out to all of my students.
That's so fun.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a great example of making, you incorporate fun, activity, self-care, all of the above. That's awesome.
Hey, everyone.
So we are about out of time. I want to make a couple of announcements and then I'll thank, because if I thank you, people will leave before I make the announcements. Next week, we have a very important session on Mental Health 101. Cody Wallace from the Counseling Center will be talking about that. Anxiety in our students, anxiety in us is a really big thing. So Cody's going to help us out with those kinds of things. I also want to put on your radar, and I've just dropped this into the chat, that the spring is not going to be that much easier. And especially without a spring break, things are going to be really, really hard. So we have some events coming up in January. The first of those will be on January 20th before the semester starts. We're talking about encouraging empathy in your course design and policies, because we're going to have to be there for our students if we want to get them through this. And then on the 27th, LaBarbara Wigfall is going to be presenting on maintaining your and your students' mind, body, and spirit, because good teachers teach content, but great teachers teach people. And I think we want to be great teachers. Yes, those will be noon to 1. And those Wednesdays thing, we'll be having the same noon schedule over our spring semester. And we have a wonderful lineup coming then. We'll give you more details as we progress. But I don't want to end without thanking Kylie, Greg, and Rebecca for a wonderful presentation today. I learned a lot. I get to share a lot of these. I get to see all of my colleagues with all their wonderful stuff. And the things that you do to support students and first generation students in particular is just wonderfully inspiring. And I needed that jolt right now. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming and for the opportunity.
And if anyone wants to stay out for a second for a question, I'm sure our presenters, or at least one of them, will stick around for just a second. The rest of you, hopefully we'll see you next week.